everybody. My name is William Oliver. This is my channel, Boston DevOps Bill. Today we're going to start implementing 5 components. We're going to begin with the provisioning, and what we're going to do is start from the very beginning. So to begin with, call up your web browser, and what we want to go to is vagrantup.com, just in case you don't have Vagrant installed. It's fairly simple. There's a download button. Just click it, find your operating system, and then go ahead, click it, and bring that package down. And then we want to proceed over to Oracle VirtualBox and pretty much do the same thing. Click on the download button, find your host, and bring that down. Now, each one of those have their own install. They're very easy to install, so I don't expect you to have many problems. If you do have problems, it's going to be with the VirtualBox install. And the issue which you might run into is that with VirtualBox, it installs drivers into your computer, and on Windows there's various levels of protection. So what you can do to get around that is simply run the install as administrator. Okay, so if I right click on the exe, the install exe, and click on run as administrator, that should solve any problems you might have. Okay, so very quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new Vagrant file. So you might want to pause this video until the installation until the download's complete, and then you go through the installation process. Make sure that you can access the Vagrant command from a command line window without having it return command not found. If that's the case, you might need to reboot. And if that still persists, then you may need to double check the path variable, the system path variable, to make sure that it's locating that and VirtualBox. So let's continue, and we're going to start by defining a very basic Vagrant file. I'm going to go ahead and save this simply so, and the file name which we're going to use is just Vagrant file. There is no extension on this file, and you want to save it, and once it's saved, then you're free to follow along. Comments are entered with a hash symbol in front. Okay, so this is a comment. The directives are combined from both Vagrant and from VirtualBox. So if we go back to our VirtualBox, we can go to end user docs, and we can find the manual online here and go to the HTML version. And what you're looking at here is the various commands which Vagrant will issue to VirtualBox, and in some cases will issue VirtualBox commands also. Vagrant itself, to discover the various OS boxes, has a website called app.vagrantup.com, and if you go to that website, you can find all the various boxes which you can use, which are the individual OSs which we're going to launch within our virtualized environment. So to begin with, I'm going to create a variable called Vagrant API version. And this is going to be version 2. Okay, and from there we're going to begin to define a configuration using the configure statement, and we will use our version, and we're going to define our config version using the config symbol. And this is a Rubyism, and basically what it's doing is it's taking a method, which is the Vagrant configure, it's issuing a do command, and it's aliasing that command with the word config. So when we reference that method, we can simply say config.vm.box, and this is going to be equal to CentOS/7. Whoops. Be nice to put some quotes in there. There we go. And that box right there pertains to the Vagrant Cloud boxes, which I mentioned before. And here it is. This is the box which we're going to be downloading. Okay. So, and that box will be maintained by the Vagrant community and updated periodically. If we wanted to prevent that, we can actually put a qualifier or a version number so that we always get the same box. But at this point in time, we're not interested in doing that. Okay, so we're now going to define the host name, and I'm just going to call it my new. Yeah, I want to do that in all lowercase. My new host name. And we will alias this as define host. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Vagrant command to provision our network. And to do that, we want to use our define host, because we are still in the define host block. And this block is actually inside of our other configure block. Okay. So define host dot vm dot network and forwarded port. So we're going to forward our ports from our host machine, and for me that's my PC, to our virtual environment. Okay. So our guest is going to pick up that port on port 80, and our host is going to define a port called 9000, and we will specify an ID of HTTPD, which is the protocol which it's going to use. And that pretty much will allow us to, that pretty much sets up our network. So as you can see, it's very high level, it's very easy. One of the things which we're going to do next is go ahead and make a couple of minor adjustments here. So for this, let's do a config.vm. We're going back to our config statement up here. And we're going to say VM host name, which is going to define our host name inside of our box, and I'm going to call it my new host name. Okay. And config.network and config VM network, because we want to configure the VM network. We configured the host network above. to forward the port. So now we're going to go ahead and define the VM network, and we're going to call it a private network. And this is going to create a bridge connection. And IP, and I'm going to specify an IP, NATed IP address, and it's going to be, excuse me for that, had to sneeze. It's going to be on the 192.168, which is a non-routing address on my machine, and I'm just going to create a subnet of 32 with a IP of 10. Okay, and after that we're just going to do a config.vm.provider, and our provider is going to be VirtualBox. And I'm going to alias that to VB so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to use the Vagrant command VB customize. And we're going to pass it an array, because this command right here, the modify VM, is a VirtualBox command. So we're issuing VirtualBox commands, and right now the :ID is going to be replaced by the actual ID of the VM which we're creating. Okay, and that's why the colon is to the left of the variable. When it's to the right of the variable, such as IP, it is actually the data of a data value pair which is being passed into Ruby. Okay, so for that, the colon goes on the right hand side. Just something you might want to keep track on. Memory. Now we're provisioning the memory, if I can spell that right. Okay, there we go. And we're going to pass it a value of 2048. If you require more, you can pass more. If you don't have that resource, you can specify less. But I believe that you really do need at least 2K of memory, at least, 2K of memory, 2 meg of memory in order to, 2 gig of memory in order to run the OS properly. Okay. So if you run into problems where it's acting weird, you might have to just bump that value up a little bit. And again, here's our ID. And we're passing the flag of name, and we're going to give it my new host name. Okay, and that's really all there is to a Vagrant file. So as you can see, it does a lot for us automatically, but let's go take it for a test drive. Okay, so let me save this and jump into my directory, and we have a Vagrant file there, the one which we just created, and we'll go ahead with Vagrant. We have commands to check the status of what our virtual environment is currently, so we can do a Vagrant status. Here is one of the Vagrant commands, and it will go out and check the state of the virtual machine, and here it's saying that it's not created. So in order to create the machine, Vagrant has a couple of commands. So if we go Vagrant minus help, we can see all the various box commands we'll be using today. We'll be using up, and we'll be using, whoop, there we go. We just use status, and we'll use halt, and then we'll use destroy, okay? If you want, there is a generic Vagrant file which can be created by simply typing Vagrant in it, but in this class, or in this episode, we just did our own. So we can go ahead and type Vagrant up, and let's see if we have all the correct syntax. It is now bringing up the machine. And it takes a little bit of time to do this. So the first time it'll download the box and, you know, go ahead and set up everything. So that adds to the amount of time in which it takes to initialize and bring up a machine. So what we're doing right now is we're actually in the process of bringing the machine up. And it'll take a couple of seconds, so I'm going to pause this, and when we come and jump back as soon as it completes, well, better yet, you know what? I'll stay around. Maybe I'll add some funky music or something. Okay, at this point, the machine has been created, the operating system has been loaded, and what it's doing right now, it is updating the packages using the yum command. Yum is the package manager for CentOS. If you're not familiar with CentOS, okay, our environment is created. We now have a VirtualBox. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. And you can see the benefit of using a provisioning tool to stand up individual environments, because it took us about 3 minutes to stand up this new environment. Now, we didn't have Puppet set up where it would go out to a repository and determine what catalog to apply to this virtual machine just yet. But you can see, if we can stand a new environment up this quickly, then what it gives us the ability to be more responsive to development managers using Agile or Scrum, where they may have certain sprints or certain iterations that require either new resources or expanded resources in terms of hardware and computing power. So we just run the status machine, and before it told us that the machine was not created, and I think that was right up here. There we go. Yep, told us not created, our new host. But now, after provisioning it, it is created and it's running. So to connect to this, we're simply going to say Vagrant SSH. And that's going to connect to our box. If we do a uname -a, we can see that we did in fact create a Linux box here. Let's do a df -k -h. We can see that it provisioned our disk at about 41 gigabytes. Okay, and it used about 970 meg to actually install it. So there we have it. It's up. So to get out of it, we can simply exit. Now, if you notice, I did not specify a GUI on this, and we'll get into that later. Okay, this is just a basic sample of how a Vagrant file works and what we're going to do in the future. Oh, Vagrant status. Okay, so now that this box is running, what we want to do is, before we shut off the computer, we want to just simply go Vagrant halt. And what that will do is that will properly shut down the VM session. And shutting down a VM session properly is really a good thing. Corruption can occur. So we shut that down, and we can verify this by doing Vagrant status. We can see that the VM is powered off, and to restart it, we simply run Vagrant up again. If we want to destroy it, we can say Vagrant destroy. Now, one thing is, because we only have one box specified, we don't need to specify the host, but otherwise we would actually specify the host that we want this command to run on. So it'd be Vagrant up in host. Okay, so that's pretty much it for our first iteration of our Vagrant file. It was simply a way in which you could, test out your machine, your connectivity, the whole 9 yards, and the next implementation of this, we're going to go deeper into the Vagrant file, and I'm actually going to create a mechanism or implement a mechanism so that we can begin to specify these boxes in a JSON format. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and continue pounding keys. Okay, and I will see you later. Thank you again. Bye-bye.